Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. So this episode, like what I thought the previous episode was going to be, this should be, fingers crossed, the final episode of the Mark II build series before it leaves for wiring. So the intro montage for this episode was spent modifying and getting the Mark II's coil, or I guess ignition module bracket, as well as the new washer fluid reservoir bracket, all modified and squared away. So I had to remove a few old pieces off of it, do some sanding and some body filler work and some painting and everything else. But this bracket is done, it's squared away now, and all that I need to do is run the coil wire right here over to the coil whenever I'm actually going to hook this thing up for good. And that will be a wrap for that side right there. But more importantly than that, the last big outstanding big ticket item for the Mark II, or items I should say, have arrived. So these two right here are the Mark II's new cooling fans. And like I have on the Mark IV, these are Spall brushless fans, which you can generally see, or generally tell, with these big blue connectors on them. So the brushless fans, as opposed to a traditional style fan, there's a few advantages to them. They are at least a lower initial amp draw, as the brushless motors can be pulse width modulated. And along with them being a lower amp draw, you can actually ramp the fans up, ramp the fans down, and they end up being kind of their own little consolidated package due to this sensor right here. So the sensor is actually kind of the brain and the heart of the operation. And this is, I believe, a 165 to 185 degree thermostat. So the way that this works, when the sensor senses that 165 degree temperature, it will bring the fans on a little bit. Pulse width modulates them to have the fans not run full out, but run at least a little bit to start cooling the car. And as the temperature continues to increase, the fan speed will continue to increase until it reaches 185 degrees. At that point, the fans will be spinning at their maximum RPM and maximum capacity. Once it begins to cool down, the fans will ramp down, eventually turn off, and really you don't need anything other than the sensor and the fans, and I guess the interface harness, to make all of this work. It's a nice, easy, consolidated, simple package, and they look cool and they work very well as well. So I have two of their 10-inch fans, which I have the spec sheet right here. There is the part number if you guys are interested in them. And these came from Bell Intercoolers, my good friends over there who have supplied me with all of the radiator and intercooler cores that you guys have seen me build parts out of here. They all come from Bell Intercoolers. So they also sell Spall products. I source these fans and all the other components through them. And most importantly, now I'm ready to begin building the fan shroud. So one thing that's a little bit screwy with these fans is figuring out the direction they spin. If you guys remember, and I'll put a tag up in the corner, I think over here, when I built the fan shroud for the Mark IV, I actually mounted the fan backwards, mounting it in what to me at that time was the logical way to mount it, and ended up being backwards, turning what is supposed to be and now is a puller fan into a pusher fan. Now that I know better, and looking at this and kind of braining and logicking my way through this orientation right here is the way that they will mount on the back of the radiator. And I can tell that between A, the connector being easily accessible, and B, it having this cage around the fan blade, so that way you kind of have to try to get your fingers down in here to have them get chopped and chewed up. So all that being said, what I need to do now is figure out the depth of my shroud. And I'll figure that out by measuring the overall depth of the fan, the overall distance that I have on the Mark II between the radiator and any points of possible contact or contention, which will be the balancer and potentially these power steering pulley and water pump pulley. And I'll have to keep in mind those clearances as I'm building this shroud, as I really don't want to have to make the same shroud over multiple times. So that's enough talking for now. Let's go ahead and get to it and see if we can't make up a fan shroud. All of the difficult portions of the Mark II's fan shroud are now completed. And this is what I am left with. So the fans do fit, albeit close, not as close as the Mark IV setup, but close nonetheless. You can see that, well, maybe you can see that I kind of staggered the fans to get clearance to the balancer. So this fan actually sits higher than this fan does. And I positioned everything to make use of kind of the architecture of the fan cages to clear the water pump pulley right here. Power steering pump pulley is no worry. And like I said, the balancer clears down there. So this is pretty much squared away at this point in time, minus a couple little odds and ends. So I have titanium fasteners coming to hold the fan shroud to the radiator, as well as some additional edge trim that I will more than likely put either on this side of the shroud or on these sides right here, just to kind of serve as a buffer so that way the shroud doesn't come down, end up hitting the actual tubes and fins on the radiator core and causing a leak or anything like that. I really don't want to destroy a custom radiator like this. I have a bunch of time in this whole setup, and I want it to last for a long time. The other thing, or things I should say, that I'll be installing are these right here. And what these are little rubber flaps. And the purpose of them is kind of in areas like this right here, where I have this big flat spot, and also underneath of this fan over here. You put those little flaps in place, or you cut holes in the shroud, then put those little flaps in place, so that way as the car is going down the road, air can push the flaps out of the way, make its way through the radiator, and assist you in cooling that way. So I'll be putting those in, and the other couple little bits like I said, and then the radiator will be a wrap, and it can be in the car for good at that point in time. And the only thing I'll have to do is figure out the radiator hoses. Now I bought OE replacement rubber hoses for it, but the more that I look at this, the more that I want to do something else. So I'm sure if you guys have been around the channel for a while, you can put the pieces together. If not, then you'll have to wait until later in the video and see what I have in mind for that. But I'm very happy with the way that this fan shroud has came out. I'm very happy that the difficult portions of it are completed now. And this is and was the last gigantic portion or gigantic sub-project involved with the greater Mark II project. So happy that it's out of the way and excited to move on to the next portions of the project. Well, the Mark II's radiator and fan shroud are now a wrap. And here is what we are left with. So new additions are these two center mounting tabs that I didn't include those in the montage as they're just simple little tabs, but these work to support the center of the fan shroud so it isn't likely to move around and end up rubbing on the actual tubes and fins of the radiator. I also have this 3/8 NPT bung, as well as these two number 6 ORB bungs, and those are in place for the thermostat or the temperature sensor for the fans, and the water inlet and outlet, or inlet and outlet for the turbo. And also I have my little flaps in place. Again, the purpose of those is as the car's going down the road, these flaps will blow open as air makes its way through the radiator and up against the back of the fan shroud. And this just creates or provides a simple path of egress for air to make its way through and help the radiator cool more effectively. So at this point, aside from some titanium fasteners, this is all done and it is ready to go back in the car. So I'm very happy that this portion of the project is completed, and when my fasteners arrive tomorrow, I can get this whole thing put together and thrown back in the car and then move on to some other final assembly. Well, as I wait on the latest order of titanium fasteners for the Mark II, now is a good time to go over the, I guess, last huge outstanding component for it. So if you remember a few videos ago, I sent the turbo for the Mark II out to be rebuilt and upgraded. And at this point in time, the turbo has arrived and it is a beautiful piece. So rather than me talking about it initially, let's go ahead and take a look at it, and then we'll go over exactly what was done to it. So what we have here is an ARM turbo in tuning 57 trim Toyota CT26 turbo. So my buddy Albert, the owner of ARM, he has a really good program for CT26 rebuilds and upgrades. And when it came time to get this turbo squared away, there was no other option that I was considering. So I guess let's go from the front side towards the rear and talk about everything that this turbo is comprised of. So looking through the compressor inlet, we can see this nice billet 57 trim compressor wheel. And Albert does this as an upgrade for them rather than having the OE cast wheel that is a lower blade count and a smaller wheel. This is an upgrade to obviously make the turbo a little bit more modern and a more high-performing turbo. So in addition to that, I also had him go ahead and vapor hone the compressor cover. So it looks like a nice brand new aluminum compressor cover. And I couldn't be happier with how nicely it's all cleaned up. Going on to the center cartridge and the turbine housing, all of this was freshly ceramic coated in a nice silver ceramic. And I also had him pull out these M6 studs for the water inlet and outlet. And the other flat is on the bottom side here that we can't see right now. But I have nice brand new, somewhere in my pile of parts right here, these nice little 6AN water inlet and outlet flanges. These will go right in there like so. And once my titanium fasteners come in, I can bolt that down for good. So onto the back side, I had him do his high flow turbine wheel and turbine service for this as well. So this will flow a little bit more, and the more exhaust gas that you can flow through the turbine housing and spin the turbine wheel, the harder and the faster you can drive the compressor wheel, and therefore the more boost and more power that you can make. Now, I'm not trying to make a ton of power with this car, so these upgrades were maybe unnecessary, but since the turbo was being rebuilt, I figured why not upgrade it at the same time, as if nothing else, it's cool to say that you have a billet wheel in your turbo. So Albert did a masterful job with this rebuild. Everything spins very nicely. He said it balanced out very nicely as well. And like I said, the only things that really need to be done to this before it goes into service are to swap out all of the fasteners that are on the turbo currently for some nice titanium ones. I set these M8 nuts aside. These will replace these two steel nuts on the turbine housing clamp. And most importantly, what I have my red paint right here for is to repaint where it says Toyota CT26 on the compressor cover. So I'll put on the screen now the photos of when I initially got this turbo all those years ago. I think these photos date back to 2005. And if you guys haven't been around for this entire build, kind of the history with this turbo, when my dad and I were initially building the Mark II, I saw this turbo online when I was looking for turbos for it, and it was the nicest one on eBay at that point in time, and I was all excited, but thought that I would never have a turbo like that. And I think it was Christmas or my birthday that year, there was a box sitting there. I opened it up, and the turbo that I had been looking at on eBay was sitting there. So my dad essentially, he bought the turbo out from under me, and the one that I wanted is the one that I inadvertently ended up getting. So to pay homage to that, I am going to repaint Toyota CT26 in red, and although the red will not match any of the blue accents under the hood of the car, it needs to be red for the sake of for the sake of being sentimental. And although, like I said, it will not match, it's exactly what I want and exactly what I need as a good memory and to pay homage to my late dad, that this was his and my project and what got me into all of the other craziness that you guys have seen in the shop and on the channel. So yesterday, my buddy Sean and I put some time in on the Mark II, and we got most of the final assembly, at least the final assembly that I'm doing here right now, knocked out. So this is what the engine bay looks like at this point in time. All of the intercooler tubing is in, the turbo is in, everything's tightened down, and I have a little bit of plumbing left to do as far as running power steering lines, running the line from the blow-off valve over to the intake manifold, little odds and ends like that. But working on this car yesterday, which was Father's Day, was a really special thing. And to start the day off, it hit me harder than I thought it was going to. And to be transparent, I got a little bit emotional just thinking about my dad and wishing that he was still around and still able to experience this car's resurrection, everything else that I've been doing for the past couple of years that he has been gone. And what started off as a day that was a bit rough and I figured was just going to be an off day, ended up being something really cool. And Sean has been one of my very good friends since we were in preschool. So I've known him for approaching 30 years at this point in time. He's been there from the beginning of this project, the beginning of everything else, the company, everything that we've done from being kids up to now being adults, he's been there for. So I was happy to have him here working on it with me. I wouldn't have wanted to do it with anybody else. And it was just a really special day. So now that we have the vast majority of the car knocked out, I can focus on getting the last few little things squared away. And I'm going to first knock out the power steering return line. So I have a brand new power steering pressure line that comes out of this port here. That's what this silver line near my index finger is. That runs around to the rack, and now I need to come from the rack back up through the power steering cooler, one of these two nipples right here, and then out of the power steering cooler up to the reservoir. And at that point in time, the power steering system will be completed. Another system checked off of the list, and the next one after that will be finishing up the cooling system. Well, I've been busy knocking out some of the little ancillary plumbing projects on the Mark II. And today I hope to finish up the last real big one, but we'll get to that here in a moment. So I have the breather lines all squared away with these nice little line spacers from Amazon. And I went ahead and I ordered titanium fasteners to replace the stainless ones. So all of these will have nice blue bolts in them. I also got the heater core line squared away. There's this one that goes up to the heater core off of the water tube that runs underneath of the header. And then I have the other one right here that runs out of the heater core and goes up to this nipple in the valley between the two cam towers. So that's all done. I'm happy with it. And now we're going to move on to, I think, one of the last fabrication projects on this car. And that is radiator hard tubes. So you can see I have a few Tycon bags here. I have this little elbow right here out of the bag, and a couple of them in their home, or what will soon be their home, right here. And what I'm doing is building titanium hard radiator hoses, or radiator tubes rather, I guess, for this car. Now, one of my buddies put this idea in my head, and initially I planned to just use factory rubber hoses, but the more I thought about it, with all the blue accents, all the titanium, it would serve me better to actually build titanium tubes for it, so that's exactly what we're going to do. This top one will be a little bit tricky as it will be tight confines, but I think I should be able to make this work. I already went ahead and trimmed the couplers back a little bit, and I think this all should work out. I have another hose end coming, a little bit lower profile one for this port right here, this upper one, and then I have a lower one over there. They're both number 6 ORB bungs, female bungs. They're welded onto the radiator, and those will be the coolant in and out for the turbo. So we'll knock those lines out a little bit later, but for right now I want to get these titanium radiator tubes done. And I'm here a little bit earlier today, as I think it's supposed to be mid-90s outside, 90 degrees that is. It'll be hot, and I want to get this done before it becomes an oven in here. So with that being said, let's go ahead, get to it, get these tubes knocked out. Well, this was a hot one here today, and if we go over and look at the thermostat, you guys can see what I'm talking about. That on the left there is the internal shop temperature in degrees Fahrenheit. See if I can get a better shot of it. It says 88 degrees, so it's nearly 90 degrees in the shop. I am nice and damp, but most importantly, the Supra, or the Mark II Supra that is, now has radiator tubes. So these came out pretty trick. I'm very happy with them. This upper one is a nice electro-anodized blue that pretty well matches the intake tube. So it looks really cool, and it isn't terribly difficult to install. There is the lower tube in there, if you guys can see it. Let's see if I can get it to refocus. There we go. But goes from the outlet of the water pump down to the bottom side of the radiator. Then water will flow up through, go through this tube right here, make its way through the thermostat, back into the engine, and all is well there. So, not the most ideal thing to sit here and be welding when it's nearly 90 degrees in the shop, but it needed to be done, and sometimes you just have to suck it up, embrace the suck, and get things accomplished. So now that those are done, tomorrow when I come in here, I can go ahead and knock out the two turbo coolant lines. Again, one of the ports is right here, the other one's on the bottom side of the radiator on the passenger side. I can get those squared away, and once those are done, and I can put this actual heater hose on the car, then all of the plumbing work, at least at this point in time, is knocked out. And I think at that point in time, that will be about all that is on my plate as far as wrap-up stuff before this car leaves for wiring. Well, between sweating through my white shirt and getting soaked cleaning this thing, I'm now sporting one of my old UNO shirts, and since we're going to take a little trip down memory lane right now, it seemed fitting. So, at this point in time, I have done everything, or almost everything, that I am going to do here, and that videos will centralize around for the Mark II build. So, this has been a really, really cool project, something that I've had a lot of fun rebuilding, restoring, and bringing back to life. It was kind of hard to believe the state that this car rolled into this spot in compared to what it is now. And it's almost like two different vehicles. It's been a ton of work, a ton of learning, and a whole lot of fun, most importantly. And it's been an awesome trip down memory lane, remembering all the things that my dad and I did with it, and did to build it, did with it, taking it out for drives and everything else. And like I've said throughout the course of this build, this has served as a really cool memory and a really cool pillar of sentimentality for my late dad, and it's a memento that I'll keep for the rest of my life that will remind me of him. This thing, there won't be any more videos right now that are centralized around it. There still is a little bit of work to do, but it's just little ancillary things like getting this hose for one of the turbo coolant lines squared away. The fitting that I ordered did not fit, so I had to order other ones. That doesn't warrant a full video. And the rest of the little wrap-up stuff on this thing, they really don't warrant, or those little items don't really warrant full videos either. So, with that being said, the next thing up will be the SC300. And I have a lot of cool ideas for this car. I cannot wait to get started on it. Kind of another forgotten car, similar to the way that the Mark II was. It'll be really cool to bring this thing back to life. And the nice thing with this is it already runs and drives right now. So it won't need to go out for wiring or anything like that. It'll be get all the fab stuff knocked out, a new fuel system, and then it will be good to go. But before we get to that, I have a big announcement for the Mark IV. Some cool new parts, cool new things that will be going on it. It will set us back a little bit from being able to go and make a hit with this car, but I think as I explain it in what will end up being the next video, it'll make sense, and I think that you guys will understand where I'm coming from with it. But before I ramble on anymore, as my feet are soaked, I'm sweaty, I'm sticky, and I'm ready to get out of here and get myself cleaned up, I think that will be about the end of this one. So thank you guys, as always, for coming along on this whole journey with me. All the other journeys, whether it be my cars, customer cars, what have you, it's been a hell of a ride here. And it is not slowing down at all. There's plenty more to do, plenty more projects to come, and this will be a busy rest of the year. So from the bottom of my heart, I thank you all very much for taking time out of your days to come along on all these different wild and crazy adventures with me. But this wild and crazy adventure is finished for now. So with that being said, that will be the end of this one. So as always, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, check out the website for manifolds, for merch, for all things good that way. Be sure to check out my 15th anniversary t-shirts and hoodies linked in the description below. I'm really excited about those apparel items, and if they speak to you, please pick one up. If they don't speak to you, hopefully I have another merchandise offering in the future that does. But with all that being said, that will be the end of this one. So I will see you guys in the next episode.